It's the first weekend of spring. I stand in a wooden rotunda overlooking Sydney Harbour. Around me, people flock and disperse like apparitions. My mouth is wide open. 24-hour choir is enacted by a shifting cohort. 100 strangers cluster and disperse from noon until noon, voicing without pause. The provocation is simple: sustain the sung breath across a day. I offer guidelines that are mostly ignored. We must instead solve the task in real time. It can't be managed alone. A breath, when expelled from one pair of lungs, is short, small, fragile. It quickly reveals corporeal limits. Supported by others, however, it creates room. It extends the body beyond itself and defines space common with others. As in any action, the duty cycle is crucial. You must rest in order to exert. You must also share the load. One person pauses, another picks up. It's counterproductive to sing in concert. It's better to overlap, to relay your energy. This requires patience and negotiation, in our case, unspoken. In other words, the basic task is to listen. Philip Glass led his own ensemble for decades. He said that the hardest thing was keeping it from falling apart. What does it take to start and maintain a bond, a group, a community, to resist the pressure to disband, to defeat entropy? Beginning is such a mystery, ending less so. I recall too many times a lover calling or emailing or texting, and in a flash we are done. Now when I see a couple on the street, I am spellbound. They have found each other and want to maintain their vocabulary. What are the odds? The day slips past, and with it the sun and the heat. The shadows bend at dusk, washing our faces with gold, then dull overhead light. A chorus of birds departs the trees. The cooling air reveals traffic from over the harbour. Brandon LaBelle says, "The power of singing and its relation to place or territory carries within it a deep political implication." Observatory Hill is the highest natural point immediately southwest of the harbour. It attracts picnics, proposals, and teenage parties. It sits in the heart of the Rocks, a district famous for intersecting symbolisms. Historian Grace Karskens notes its particular, distinctive, and complex histories of cultural interaction, the interface between land and sea. The Rocks is named after its sandstone buildings. It is tiny, a cluster of 24 streets in a narrow peninsula. It contains Australia's oldest European buildings, thick stone pubs, spidery Victorian terraces, dwarfed to the north by the Sydney Harbour Bridge. The first and continued owners of the land, the Gadigal, called their natural port Talawalada. When the British invaded, its constituency swelled. Aristocracy, then convicts, then sailors, then immigrants. It became a miasma of working-class vice. When plague swept through Sydney in the late 19th century, the area was largely cleared. The remaining buildings were repurposed as public housing. Until recently, it was the country's only neighbourhood in which the most disenfranchised enjoyed multi-million-dollar views. This was helped by the so-called Battle of the Rocks in the 1970s. Unions defied government orders to tear the buildings down. Decades later, the market won the fight. The houses were sold to private owners and the last tenants dismissed, this time with little protest. This diaspora was captured in The City of Forking Paths by Janet Cardiff and George Bures-Miller. You hold up a video screen as Cardiff's contralto guides you on a tour. Ghosts appear and disappear. Rain snaps into sunlight. Houses blur with simulacra. Cardiff's narrative is part historic, part fiction. You look through a window at what may or may not be a person, and you're not sure which century you're in. It was made in 2014 during the public sell-off and quickly became obsolete, a blueprint of loss. For me, 24-hour choir was the apex of a confounding year, a blur of airports, broken Wi-Fi, flopping on couches. 24 hours was the longest I'd spent with anyone else in months. Even flying to and from New York, as I'd done several times that year, took less time. Earlier that year, I undertook another day-long challenge on my own. In the weight of air, I modulated vibrations in an empty town hall in Hobart. I sounded a pipe organ continuously from midnight to midnight. A bag of bolts became weights, one on a different key every minute of the day, clocking time like De Chin Che. Both tasks in Sydney and Hobart revealed a non-human agency, that of the space and its contiguous air, whether contained by walls or stretching to the horizon. Both shared a shape, despite starting at opposite times of the day. The first 12 hours were easy, intoxicating. The next 6, however, increasingly impossible. The death zone. 3/4 through, both times, I lost my mind or fell asleep. But from there on, the end was easy. In both, a crowd ebbed and flowed, to sing or to listen. In both, its transience was comforting. I didn't want to be alone, but nor did I want a tribe. It is ironic that these flashpoints of flux became my year's coalescing moments. In her essay When the Hero is the Problem, Rebecca Solnit says, getting a group to sing in harmony has more to do with how most environmental battles are actually won. She calls for coordinated rather than solo action. Her list of virtues: listening, respect, patience, negotiation, strategic planning, storytelling. This could be a credo for 24-hour choir and its parent project Supercritical Mass. We facilitate opportunities for strangers to commune in civic spaces, parks, town halls, streets. We use interdependent sound to study how collectives form, maintain, and dissipate, always in sync with the materiality of the surrounds, its girders or concrete floors, and its history. We develop each action through in situ workshops. We rarely plan ahead. The journey is spontaneous. We start with the skills that each person brings, which become our basic grammar. We sense what we want and don't want to do. We learn to hold a score in the space and in the body. For the rocks, I could have written a protest song with lyrics and a melody, but I choose to work abstractly. A song without words. I want to create a common ground and widen participation. Anyone can turn up and contribute. A wordless requiem for those departing against their will. A lack of text for a lack of voice. At least one local becomes a mainstay. Graham was once a dancer and has libelous stories of choreographers past. For years he lived in a nearby cottage. From his bedroom window, he could just about see the water. He returns at various times, catching the train in from his newly assigned flat an hour away. Andrew Ford writes of Supercritical Mass that the non-professionals are likely to be blanker, better able to blend, and, because their performance depends on it, possibly better at listening. I'm torn between thinking that listening is a rare or a common skill. I'm not sure who does it better, experts or beginners. On the day I come prepared, I've written a text score echoing Pauline Oliveros. I devise ways to sing and rest to generate complex harmony. Despite this, however, my plan falls apart. Transmission corrupts the message. Instructions are misheard, singers leap in with too much confidence, people turn up when the invigilator goes for coffee. It's a mess, and I'm deeply annoyed. At 2 a.m, my score works a treat. It's just me and 2 trained singers. Everyone else makes it up. They hit the problems I foresaw. They run out of breath, they clash, they fall into feedback loops they cannot escape. But the momentum continues and I relax. I cede control and become less a composer and more a peer. People stay for hours and return unexpectedly, at dusk, at midnight, at dawn. They reward freedom with investment. In giving up control, I allow a community to invent its own teleology. Perhaps I wasn't needed after all.